Chapter 32. Rake watched with dread as the dragon's blood covered Ellie. Touching the mystical liquid had been a mistake, and now the best hope for protecting the fairy race from the invading goblin horde was surely about to die. Rake had no idea what to do. He rushed to take out a pinch of tooth dust, but could not think of a spell to help his friend. He heard Blake gasp fearfully as Fliss grabbed Rake's free hand, clutching it worriedly. The dragon's blood completely covered Ellie, making her appear as a moving statue of gold. It appeared to be flowing into her mouth, her ears, her nostrils, even her eyes. Just as suddenly as the golden fluid had begun to encase the girl, it began to retreat, flowing out of her. A few hairs appeared, then her face and neck, and before he knew it, the dragon's blood had reflowed back into the crucible. As the last of it left her, Ellie dropped to her knees, alive but clearly overcome by the threatening experience. "Are you okay?" asked Rake and Figwhip in unison. Rather than giving the yes they were hoping for, Ellie seemed to ignore the question.
"I met him,"
she said mysteriously.
"Who?"
asked Fliss, while Blake offered a guess. "You met Merlin?" To Blake, Ellie responded.
"Yes, I spoke to Merlin,"
she said, sounding overwhelmed.
"The dragon's blood provides a link through time,"
Blake commented. "It must have been a brief meeting. You were only covered in it for a moment." Suddenly sounding much older, Ellie shrugged and said a little cryptically,
"It affects time in other ways too. I was gone long enough, and have learned a lot."
Rake felt concerned over not really understanding what had just happened to Ellie. Could she really have just met a man who has been dead for over 1,000 years? Or did the dragon's blood just do something to make her believe she met someone?
"So, did you learn what to do next?"
asked Fliss.
"The plan remains the same. Next, we find my brother,"
she said. Then, for a few seconds she looked very distant, searching for something within her own mind. Abruptly she said,
"The dragon's blood can show me where he is."
"Ellie, you mustn't use the dragon's blood again," Rake warned. "You don't know what it might do to you this time."
"I know more than you would believe, Rake. Merlin taught me a great deal,"
she told him without a hint of self-doubt. Rake watched as Ellie stepped up to the bowl and touched her wand to the rim. She closed her eyes for a moment and her wand began to glow, seeming to absorb all of the light in the room. The three fairies hovered in the air, watching, while Figwhip had found a rocky perch above. Then she opened her eyes and lightly touched the centre of the dragon's blood with the tip of her wand. In the perfectly circular golden ripples, an image formed. A column of boys, about 30 of them, marched towards a camp. Ellie focused in on a boy at the front and gasped before squeaking with excitement,
"That's Duncan! He's alive!"
The relief was clear as a tear appeared in the corner of the girl's eye.
"I knew we would find him."
She looked around, as if searching for someone to hug, but her companions could only smile at her joy. Watching the image in the magical liquid, they saw her brother marching beside a large scarred boy with only one eye, who carried a goblin on his shoulder. "He's still at the training camp," Rake said, although they could all see that for themselves. "It looks like he's just getting back from some sort of exercise. We'll watch for a while and think of the best way to rescue him." They watched as the group of boys entered the camp. Rake was intrigued as boys left the column, splitting off to scatter through the camp. It was frustrating that the dragon's blood could not allow them to hear what was happening. The boy that Ellie had identified as her brother, as well as the large warrior with the goblin and a few others, stood near the centre for a while. There were other boys in the camp, but the ones that Ellie was focused on seemed to be acting differently. For one thing, they just weren't doing very much at all. Most of the other boys in the camp looked very busy. Just as Rake was tiring of observing the inactivity, about to ask Ellie if she could use the dragon's magical golden liquid to spy on other parts of the camp, things became much more complicated. Duncan and his companions leapt into action, drawing their weapons and attacking the goblins, killing them with swift strokes of their swords. Ellie gasped in surprise and the dragon's blood rippled again, the picture becoming fuzzy for a moment. Ellie's wand glowed brighter for an instant, and the picture sharpened. She zoomed the image out, and the fighting could be seen throughout the camp as the boys Duncan had led into the camp attacked goblins.
"Your brother seems to be as interesting as yourself, Ellie,"
commented Fliss.
"He seems to have freed himself of the goblins and is leading a revolt. We should go and help him,"
said Ellie.
"Perhaps,"
responded Fliss.
"but we must be careful not to ruin his plan."
"What's that, at the edge of the picture?" asked Blake. It took the rest of them a moment to see what the youngest fairy meant. Then Ellie refocused the image to reveal more forces arriving through a portal. It was a large portal, and soldiers kept coming through in shining armour.
I've heard of the humans in the shining armour,
said Figwhoop in his scratchy voice.
That must be the King's Guard. I think that Umkar himself is about to ambush your brother.
Ellie kept surprisingly calm.
Rake, can you make a portal to this place, from seeing it like this?
It was an interesting question. He had never made a portal to somewhere he hadn't been, but the picture was quite clear, even if it was all golden coloured. Maybe. Yes, I think, he answered, very unsure of himself. Ellie shifted the image to a different part of the landscape, on the opposite side of the camp from where the Kingsguard were pouring through a portal.
Make it to there, Rake,
she ordered, pointing into the vision in the small pool of golden liquid. Then she turned to Fliss, giving orders in a commanding tone.
Fliss, make a portal to the great trees. Blake, go through with your pigeon and give a full report to the elders.
Rake felt a little relief at the thought of his young cousin being sent out of harm's way, but a tinge of anxiety at the thought of the elders finding out what he had been doing. He had a sinking feeling that his career as a tooth fairy was about to come to an abrupt end one way or another. He began to concentrate on the image that Ellie was showing him, taking a pinch of tooth dust to help him create a portal. But as he concentrated on the seed of a portal, at which he could direct the dust, nothing was happening. Maybe I can't make a portal to somewhere I've never been. They were all watching him, while Fliss had already created a portal to the great trees and Blake sat astride his pigeon ready to go through. I can't do it, Rake admitted. Ellie hid her disappointment well, then her eyes glazed as she once again had a look of her mind being in another place. Coming out of the brief reverie, she spoke again.
Change of plan. Blake, might I borrow the use of your pigeon?
Blake looked a little confused, but placed his hand on his pigeon for a moment, communicating with it in a way for which he had a special talent. He agrees. Look after him, he said as he leapt off of the bird. As Fliss reminded him that the portal to the great trees wouldn't stay open much longer, he waved goodbye as he flew through, disappearing to safety. Rake looked at the clumsy bird, with no idea of what Ellie had in mind. Saying nothing, she broke her link with the dragon's blood and led them outside, back over the ice bridge. She then pointed her wand at the pigeon and the bird began to grow, increasing in size at an incredible rate. How can she have learned so much in just a moment? Surely it would take a lifetime to master such magic, he thought, incredulous at Ellie's new magical ability. With the bird several times her size, she stopped and jumped onto its back, sitting astride it in the way that Blake usually did. Indicating that they should join her, Ellie said,
We haven't got a second to waste. I just hope we will get there in time.
Realizing that Ellie meant to fly to her brother's rescue, Rake knew it was many miles to the training camp. Even flying, they would not arrive in time to be of much help. As Figwhoop scrambled up to sit on Ellie's lap, she launched the bird into the air. Rake and Fliss flew after. As they rose, strong gusts of wind began to form, following the bird, making it go ever faster. Rake realized he was not going to be able to keep up for long, and was forced to land on the bird also, immediately copied by Fliss. As they rose above the Valley of Merle, Ellie increased the magic, creating a tunnel of rushing wind carrying the flapping bird faster than any bird had ever flown. But it was still a long way, and Rake worried that they would be too late.